go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to our Science, Technology, Innovation, and Policy Leadership Lecture Series. I'm Sanjay Raman. I'm the Associate Vice President for the National Capital Region. I'm also a professor in electrical and computer engineering. And I also serve as the President and CEO of the Virginia Tech Applied Research Corporation. So I am very happy to help organize these. It's an opportunity to bring in leaders from the science and technology community in the National Capital Region, expose our community, our students and faculty and researchers to these leaders, and hopefully stimulate some discussion about emerging topics and areas that are broadly of interest to the Virginia Tech community, but certainly here in the National Capital Region. So I'm very pleased to have a distinguished scientist and leader with us today for today's lecture, Dr. Valerie Browning. She became the director of the DARPA Defense Sciences Office. I should define DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Defense Sciences Office, just about a year ago, December 2017. She has more than 30 years experience managing defense-related R&D programs in a wide array of areas. Prior to rejoining DARPA, I should say, she was an independent consultant serving a number of customers in the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and other agencies in areas of advanced materials and alternative energy. She was also the Chief Technology Officer for Helm Incorporated, a woman-owned small business in the R&D area. She was a program manager in the same office, Defense Sciences Office, from 2000 to 2007. I think you and I just overlapped a little bit. I think you gave me a program when you were leaving. She managed a broad portfolio of R&D topics in metamaterials, in biomagnetics, unmanned underwater vehicles, energy storage, portable power, thermoelectrics, and other areas. She also worked as a research physicist at the Naval Research Laboratory from 1984 to 2000. She has a doctorate from the Catholic University of America, a master's degree in physics from University of Maryland, and she's a Hokie. She has a bachelor's degree in physics from Virginia Tech as well, and she is also a Hokie mom, and I think has one recent graduate, and a current sophomore at Virginia Tech as well. So thank you again for joining us, and please welcome Valerie to the stage.
Thank you, Sanjay, for that kind introduction, and really thank you for the opportunity to be here. Of course, Virginia Tech has got some special place in my life. Mark, with me today is the Deputy Director of Defense Sciences Office, Mark Rosker, and he and I like to do these sorts of presentations because the university academic community is really, really critically important to our overall R&D ecosystem. Technology, innovation, more often than not, starts with very fundamental science innovation, and so you all are really upstream of a lot of what we do in our more applied offices. And so we like to make sure that the community understands the DARPA mission, in particular what our office, the Defense Sciences Office, mission is within DARPA, let you know what our interest areas are and how you can best reach out to us and engage and bring us your good ideas. So how many of you know anything about DARPA? Let me ask the other question. How many of you don't know anything about DARPA? Nobody. Okay. So I won't belabor this chart here, but I'll touch on a couple things. This year actually marks 60 years of DARPA's existence. We were founded a few months after the launch of the Soviet Sputnik satellite, and we were founded out of a sense of urgency. It was perceived that an adversary had developed a capability that we could not replicate, and there was concern that this new capability presented a real and potentially near-term threat to our national security. And DARPA was stood up to have a place that would capture that and maintain and nurture that urgency so that in the future, hopefully we would not have to be surprised by an adversary's use of technology. So today, we remain true to our initial mission, and I'm going to talk in a few slides about some of the ways that we preserve that sense of urgency. But as you can see from the slide, that throughout our existence, we've made very important and pivotal investments in core technology areas that have ultimately translated into capabilities that have been very, very important to national security as well as our commercial industries. So just a little bit about our budget. We hover around $3 billion investment. We are a projects agency, so most of our money actually goes out the door to fund research projects at universities, industry, FFRDC, and other laboratory nonprofits, large and small companies. Our investments represent roughly 3% of the total federal R&D budget. At the agency level, about anywhere from 14 to 17%, it sort of fluctuates, of the total budget ends up going to the university or academic community. Within our office, that number is much higher. Our office, as I'm going to discuss in a little bit, is focused more on the fundamental and foundational spectrum of R&D. So within our office, it's closer to 40 to 45% typically that of our budget that goes to the university community. So I mentioned that today we still preserve that sense of urgency, and we do this through both our people, our processes, and our culture. So a DARPA program manager comes to DARPA as somebody who's recognized as a leader in their respective field of R&D. They come knowing that they're only going to be there for a short amount of time. So there's really, again, that sense of urgency. They come with a passion to make a difference in national security, usually with a couple ideas in mind of things that they really feel can be transformational with the right investments. And they have to hit the ground running if they actually want to get a program started and see any progress before it's time for them to leave. So they really, you'll hear people talking about how DARPA PMs have their hair on fire. Well, it really is true. All of us come, if you look at a date on a badge, if you come to DARPA, we all have expiration dates on our badges. Very mission-driven. Yeah. Or more gray than when we started. The DARPA program, the processes in terms of developing areas of investment, again, very much focused on mission objectives and national security objectives. Our programs tend to run, a few years to 4 or 5 years. Sometimes longer, but then they're usually broken up into multiple phases so that we have a way of measuring progress and redirecting if we need to. We tend to go after high risk, high payoff types of investments, and we are an agency that recognizes that failure is an option. So we will take risk when we understand that there is potential for large payoff, and we take great pride in what we're doing there. Everybody here is very much dedicated to investing and making a difference in our national security. So as you can imagine, as the world changes over the past 60 years, the areas that DARPA invests in has changed to reflect what are the sort of driving threats to national security that we care about. So today, the threats and the factors that are shaping our thinking in terms of how we organize our portfolio include the fact that we do face a wide array of threats from both state and non-state actors. We still worry about WMD and WMT threats. It's a persistent challenge. We are increasingly seeing through the globalization of technology that we have peer competitors in all domains. And increasingly we see new domains, cyber and space, that we really have to worry about. We still have to execute counterterrorism, peacekeeping, counterinsurgency operations throughout the globe. And again, this fast pace of technology development means that we are increasingly having to run faster than our adversaries if we're going to maintain our technological advantage. So with that in mind, our current director, Steve Walker, who I guess was appointed permanent director, well, not permanent, but was appointed the actual, not acting director, maybe a month before I actually started as the director of DSO. Looked at across the portfolio of the agency and organized our portfolio into these 4 mission areas. So the first is defending the homeland, and so here we're looking at technologies that help us address cyber attack, the weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass terror, bio defense. Another mission area is the ability to deter and prevail against our peer adversaries. And here we're looking at hypersonics and new, more robust space operations, the ability to deliver long-range effects. The third area is effectively prosecuting stabilization efforts. So you increasingly hear about sort of hybrid warfare or gray zone warfare, where we have to actually execute our mission in urban environments against non-traditional tactics that fall short of a kinetic conflict. And so again, how do we counter those types of operations? There's an aspect of understanding how social behavioral sciences might impact how we would operate in those spaces. So those are our 3 sort of mission-focused areas. And then we have a 4th sort of overall thrust area within our portfolio, which is the foundational science that supports across all of those missions. So here, core things like materials and artificial intelligence and quantum, new math, new biology. So we have a very robust foundational investment as part of our portfolio that supports across all of these mission spaces. So DARPA is organized into 6 technical offices. 2 of these offices, on your right, Strategic Technology and the Tactical Technology Office, are what we call our systems offices. So they are focused on the platform developments that operate across many domains. I don't see
if there's a laser pointer.
Yeah, I don't see one. And then in And the Strategic Technology Office, which really works on the technologies that help support those platforms, as well as the tools to help use those platforms in new ways that can surprise our adversary. And then there's the 4 technology offices, which are built around sort of focus areas. The BTO, of course, is looking at biology as a technology to address biosecurity challenges. Information Innovation Office, or the I2O, is looking at cyber defense and other ways of using information, extracting value out of information, and facilitating advances in AI to help human-machine symbiosis. Microsystems Technology Office is looking at electronics. They consider how globalization of technology might be able to actually use to our advantage, and they have a large initiative on, called the Electronics Resurgence Initiative to sort of look at what's beyond Moore's Law. Some of the stuff that they do, it looks at how we might leverage and better utilize the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And then you have DSO, where we have sort of broad technology areas, and I'm going to talk through these in more detail, but we are unique amongst the offices at DARPA in terms of both our diversity of both our people and our programs. We look across the broadest landscape of technology, and we tend to be the most forward-leading across that broad spectrum. So we like to think of ourselves as being DARPA's DARPA, in that the investments that we are making today help inform the strategies of the rest of the agency, maybe 3, 5, 10 years and beyond, and even beyond DARPA, helping to inform the broader DoD S&T enterprise. We do tend to invest very broadly in many of the areas that the rest of the agency is, but again, we're at that very fundamental and foundational end of the spectrum typically. That said, we do understand, and our PMs will always be able to tell you why we're investing in a particular technology, because we perceive there to be a mission, new capability that will impact national security. So if DARPA is, within the context of DARPA's mission of making pivotal investments in technology, breakthrough technologies for national security, DSO's investments represent some of the earliest of those pivotal investments. So just real quickly, hopefully that some of you will be encouraged to reach out to some of our PMs. I wanted to give you a name to go with some of the faces, or a face to go with some of the names that you, I would encourage you to go to our website and you can learn about the different, specific areas of interest. But again, you can see the diversity in both in terms of personality and their areas of expertise. So I'll draw your attention to a couple of our newest PMs. So our actual newest PM is Tatiana Kirchik. She's coming on board to help us build some work in the area of quantum science and quantum simulation. Bill Carter is helping us rebuild some of our portfolio in material science, particularly in the areas of materials for harsh environments. And Ted Senator also joined us over the summer, and he's helping us to build a more robust artificial intelligence portfolio. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of our current portfolio and areas that are of interest to us. But before I do that, I want to go through the process and the thinking that led us to organize our portfolio the way we are, and help us inform going forward what areas that we think should be prioritized in terms of investment. So as Sanjay mentioned, I started as the director of DSO last December. And DSO had, at that time, had thrust areas that I felt were reflective of the portfolio, but did not have enough of a mission emphasis. And just a little bit of history, DSO is the oldest continuously running office currently at the agency. We started, and we evolved out of what had been called the Material Science Office. So for many years, our office was built around thrust areas that were sort of core disciplines: materials, math, biology, more sort of focused on actual disciplines. And then as biology began to grow and larger and larger within the office in the early 2000s, it was decided that we needed to pull it off into its own office. So we actually created the BTO was actually created out of DSO in 2014. And when that happened, it pulled a lot of the resources, both people and money, out of the office. And this is actually the second time that happened out of DSO. The Microsystems Technology Office was actually created out of DSO back in the 80s, I believe. So when that happened in 2014, you saw a shift from more sort of mission areas or core areas of investment to the year after to thrust areas there were three of them, I guess, and it was foundations, tools, and integrated demonstrations. And the director then did that very intentionally because she wanted to open up the aperture and have DSO have an opportunity to redefine sort of where it goes from here. And one of the areas that we started moving into at that point was social behavior sciences, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But so we had by the time I came in, there were 3 years of sort of evolving again. What DSO began to grow, we began to bring more people in. And so it was a good time to start thinking about, again, from a mission perspective, what are the areas that we should be investing in? How do we build our portfolio from a mission-informed perspective? So that's a long way of getting to, how did we get to these charts? So one of the first things that we did was we educated ourselves. We listened to a number of thought leaders in terms of what does the future operational environments look like. And what are the challenges that we may face in the future? And we were 10, 20 years out. And from a technology, what are the implications for defense? And then from a technology perspective, what are the opportunities to get ahead of some of those challenges? And so we really identified sort of 4 trends and opportunities that we felt we could build our portfolio around. And the first of these was the fact that technology, it really is becoming global. The pace of technology development has really accelerated. And so from defense perspective, what that means is we need to run faster if we're going to maintain our advantage. And as we develop new technology, we have to be thinking from the very beginning about what the counter to that technology is going to be, because our adversaries are right behind us, and they're going to have it soon. So flipping that over, okay, so where could we invest where we could turn this around to an opportunity? So again, thinking about new ways that we can engage the community to accelerate the development of S&T, and really maybe focusing part of our portfolio into ways that we could deter our adversaries' ability to use new technology. So these technical opportunities are areas that our PMs have focused on in terms of trying to develop new programs. Escalation options. I mentioned earlier that at the DARPA level, one of our areas is effectively prosecuting stabilization operations and gray zone warfare. Our adversaries are increasingly using tactics that they have an objective, and they cause friction, and they are slowly working towards transfer of power or transfer of resources, but it's short of a kinetic conflict. And we, from afar, as we look at how these techniques are applied against areas that might affect our own interests, or certainly affect our adversaries' interests, we have options that are really either go big or go home. Right? We can complain about it, but we don't really have much of a toolkit to counter those types of activities. And so we really need to develop that type of a toolkit. So here again, the technical opportunities are really to understand better what actions we can take to yield a particular reaction of our adversary. How can we regain the ability to escalate, de-escalate in a particular scenario? Another area that's driving our investment strategy is that the pace of conflict, with hypersonic weapons and the potential for conflict in space, is driving things to a much faster pace. And what that means for us is that we need to be able to make better, faster decisions. And it also means that there's an opportunity that if we can slow our adversary's ability to make these decisions, there's opportunities for us. So this drives potential opportunities for investing in new sensing modalities, better models of environments, and particularly models that allow us to take into account the dynamic and changing environment, new ways of computing that might have advantages in terms of swap or speed or ability to handle really large, complex situations, and an opportunity to turn complexity around and see about how we might be able to impose complexity in terms of the way we counter our adversaries' activities. And then finally, the WMD/WMT threats still persists. And so, and as you can see from this map, the incidence is quite frequent. So we really want to take this threat off the table, and particularly we want to think about ways that we can just make it not worth the effort for our adversaries to employ these types of technologies. So new sensors, new ways of understanding and predicting, the left of boom intent to use these. If we can get to our adversaries before they're actually able to deploy, and again, just make the effort to be too much for the adversaries to really consider using these approaches. So those are sort of the foundational thoughts in terms of the global environment within DSO that we think about in terms of as how we structure our portfolio. So so these are now our thrust areas. And I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of programs that we are investing in today, and I'll talk about some of the areas that I think we we are looking to go beyond what we're already doing. So in the limits of sensing and sensors thrust area, here we recognize that measurement of signals ranging from DC to daylight are ubiquitous across so many DoD applications. It can be ISR, it can be navigation, it could be target ID and tracking, it could be health monitoring for our warfighters. Within this thrust area, we're interested both in terms of the fundamental limits as well as what we can practically take out of the laboratory, because we need to understand the art of the possible, but ultimately we need to be able to deliver capabilities into the hands of our military. And in recent history, we've been really good at advancing different sensing modalities in a laboratory environment, world record timing, world record sensitivity, but we've not been so good about actually engineering that capability in a way that we can actually take it out and deliver it in terms of a capability. So we're investing here as we go forward in new ways of doing sensing, ways that new materials, new structures that allow us to manipulate light in new ways that might really change the way we think about designing optics and sensing systems. Here we have some work on quantum with a focus on sensing at this point, but how we can actually, again, get this technology out of a laboratory and into a capability. And new ways of thinking about hardware for low swap electronics and memory. So as an example of a program, Mark is actually running this one now, is we are looking at really trying to understand the theoretical limits of extracting information from multi-bounce photons so that we ultimately might have an ability to see around a corner or through an obstruction. And so there's theoretical work being done here. There's some experimental work being done on advancing camera technology. And ultimately, the goal of this program, if we're successful, the final demonstration of this program would be to do a full 3D reconstruction of a hidden, around a corner or of an obscured scene from a single vantage point. So I mentioned that we're really working to try and take the exquisite performance that we can see in the laboratory for different sensing and timing technologies out of the laboratory. And there's actually a really good story here at DARPA in terms of how we're trying to do this. MTO just recently started a program called A-PHI, I believe it's called. And from their perspective, they're trying to miniaturize and ruggedize the physics package that goes around the quantum state so that they can provide the pristine environment that the technology needs to exist outside of a laboratory. From DSO, working sort of from the ground up, we are actually trying to engineer a more robust, intrinsically robust quantum state. So the principle is actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to see if I can play this movie for you. But the idea is that if you can drive a system that's unstable drive it out of equilibrium, then there is actually the possibility of creating a more robust state. And so there's a movie here. Let's see if this works. So, of course, this inverted pendulum is let's drive it. So, let me get back to the presentation. So, that is the idea behind our driven non-equilibrium quantum systems program. Full screen mode, here we go. Looking at how we can drive the quantum state in and out of equilibrium at a frequency that still allows you to do whatever measurement of whatever signal of interest. So the frequency has to be such that you have time to integrate enough in between the driving frequency to get sufficient signal to noise. This is a new program. It was started earlier this year, and so ultimately what we what we believe we can do here, and particularly if we intersect with the work that's being done in MTO, this is a way of really getting that extraordinary performance in terms of sensitivity and precision out of the laboratory and into fieldable packages.
So is the goal coherence length?
You want to extend the coherence length, yeah. So you can do that again either by providing a more stable environment, insulating, or you can create a more intrinsically stable state. Now, I didn't mention this, but one of the challenges, of course, is you try to make these systems more and more compact. It's not a single quantum state, right? It's many states, and as they get closer and closer together, they begin to talk to each other, and so there's an instability simply from trying to compress too many of those closer to the smaller volume. So this driving frequency helps mitigate that as well. Again, I think I mentioned earlier that after a BTO was pulled out and we were looking for, where does DSO think of going next, we hired a social anthropologist. Social anthropologist. His name's Adam Russell. And we've been in the mode of developing programs that I would describe as tools and methodologies that allow us to better leverage innovation coming out of the social sciences, to understand when the results coming out of that community actually apply in the context of DoD scenarios. And it's important because, again, our stability and deterrence operations, training, wargaming, all of these rely very much on understanding the human domain. And so the idea is to better develop these tools and methodologies to better leverage innovation. We also, under this thrust, are looking at ways of being able to model and plan for teams that consist of both humans and machines. We really don't have these tools that, particularly in a dynamic environment, can manage resources across both the humans and the machines in a way that allow the humans to benefit from what the machines can do, and the machines do what they're most suited to do. So we have some efforts to look at how to manage those sorts of resources, and again, we have these tools and methodologies to better leverage innovation coming out of social sciences. And where we're trying to pivot to next is, now that we have these programs to these tools and methodologies, we actually want to apply them to really hard problems, the DoD, that involve the need to understand the human domain. So, the portfolio so far has been, again, in the context of tools and methodologies, and one of the tools for our newest programs is really to provide consumers, DoD and intelligence analysts, consumers of social science results, a tool for them to understand the degree to which they can have confidence in a particular result in the context of the model that they're trying to develop. So think sort of analogous to a credit score. And the idea here is that we can crowdsource and do market predictions in the financial markets, and it's been very successful. And can we apply a similar approach in the literature, the social science literature, looking for these weak signatures? Could be the chatter or the discussions around a particular result, and can these prediction markets accurately predict whether a particular result will be reproducible? So we're first testing that hypothesis. So we actually have to run these experiments and actually demonstrate that this works in the context of social science. And then if it does, we're looking to actually automate that process so that ultimately, in the end, a new result comes out, or an existing result, and an analyst may be trying to build a model that leverages some of these results, that they can type in the paper and they can get quickly an assessment of how likely that result is to be reproducible and replicable in the context of what they're doing. So a very ambitious result, new program, just getting started. And again, I mentioned the need for new modeling and design software to allow us to make best use of these heterogeneous teams that are comprised of machines and humans, hybrid teams, and so our agile teams, A-teams, effort is looking to develop those models as well as the test beds to actually try them out in the context of real-world military missions. So think UAV teams or logistics or medical applications. Because ultimately the goal of all of our investments is to ensure that we have the best technology deployed to our military, we have something called the anticipating surprise thrust. And here we are looking at investing in somewhat more narrowly focused technologies where, because we have this luxury in DSO of looking across such a broad landscape, we will sometimes see technology bubbling up for a particular application in one domain that we realize addresses a long-standing or emerging challenge in another domain. And sometimes we can piece together those solutions because we have this broad purview in ways that other people wouldn't think about doing. And so, again, the efforts under this particular thrust tend to be focused on a particular challenge, a particular approach to a particular challenge, and oftentimes they tend to be a little bit more near-term in scope than some of our other programs. So again, some of the things that we're looking at here, we're trying to look into building portfolio around materials for harsh environments. We do have a existing and growing portfolio of efforts looking at novel ways of defending against WMD and WMT threats. Other areas we're exploring new energetic materials and new ways of doing energy transduction for power and other types of applications. So as an example of a new program that's building on the successes of a prior program, we have the Sigma Plus program. And the idea here is to develop a scalable, very capable network of sensors that provides early detection and monitoring for the full spectrum of chem, biological, rad, nuke, and explosive threats. This program builds on the success of an earlier program started in 2014, and this is a really good example of where the PM saw something being developed. It turned out they were sensors being developed for PET scans in the medical community that he realized could be engineered into very capable sensors for monitoring the radiological threat, body-worn sensors, and they could be very low cost and very high performing. He combined that with emerging network capabilities where you could have broadband communications and network thousands of these sensors. And in the course of 4 years, he built up a network capability of these radiological detectors that has actually been demonstrated multiple times and is actually transitioned as being deployed. So it's become a deployable capability. So in Sigma Plus, we really are trying to build on the Sigma success and expand this to include the full spectrum of threats. And then finally, there's a program called Fast Lightweight Autonomy, and in this program, we were really looking to develop algorithms that would allow commercial, low-cost, small UAS platforms with commercial cameras to execute missions that we would not want to send humans into. So think clearing a building that might have hostile adversaries in it, or maybe in a disaster response where things might not be safe. So we want these platforms to be fully autonomous, you want to give them a minimal of instructions. Go into that building and see if there's anybody in there. So it has to be able to navigate indoors, outdoors. It has to recognize where it's been, where it hasn't been, and understand when it's done and come back. And so that program has been very successful. And I'm going to show you a quick movie from that. This one's got a little bit of narration from it too.
So in phase 2, I had each team focus on pushing the state-of-the-art within their strength. We had one team focus on flying very fast in a natural environment, trying to avoid obstacles at the maximum speed the vehicle could do. second environment I looked at was an urban setting. And in this case, I was focused on comprehending the scene both from a semantic and a dimensional perspective. So understanding that we were flying over a street and there are cars, buildings, roads, and then looking at building a map of that environment. Not necessarily a dimensional map, but more like a semantic map, where we have the streets and then we say there are 3 cars in that street, for example. And the last team focused on flying in very confined spaces, so going through very small apertures and going also in more of a 3D kind of environment. So you had the ability to go through a second floor window, visit rooms that are open, find a staircase, go down and exit the building, for example. I have a lot of people who come to me from many different agencies within DoD or outside of DoD, and they are really interested in this capability. The class of vehicle that we're looking at are becoming inexpensive enough, and there's now a commercial effort to provide open platforms where you can go and buy these hardware and we can give you the software. Now, there's going to be a little bit of more work, but it's mostly engineering. The science, I think, is getting mature enough that we can start to transition towards a product development effort, and that's very exciting to me.
So this is a little bit dated. J.C. Leday, who's a PM there, left in June. He's moved on. He's actually working elsewhere in the DoD on this type of technology. But he's right that there are a number of transition partners who are very interested in taking this technology and applying it to different missions.
So the navigation they demonstrated inside.
There's no GPS.
Completely autonomous.
It's completely autonomous and it's completely visually driven. So. Okay, so then our final thrust area is what we call our frontiers in math, computation, design. This is really a cross-cutting thrust, and it's really addressing the challenge that the DoD environments are becoming increasingly complex, increasingly technologically sophisticated and dynamic. And we really need new tools to make sure that we can plan for future military needs, whether it's down at the materials level, at the component level, at the system level, or the system of systems level. We need to be able to span that entire space. And so new math, new design tools, new computational substrates, AI, understanding the fundamental science behind AI. What are the source of the limitations of the current, and how do we move beyond those limitations? And so some of the excuse me, some of the programs that we're looking at here. We have a program called Molecular Informatics. Excuse me. And here we're looking at molecules or chemistry as an alternative computing substrate. Molecules have a diversity of features that one could leverage for storing and potentially computing. Chemical reactions can be massively parallel. It's been demonstrated using DNA that you can store information very densely. So this program is really looking to build on some of these early observations and ask questions about what ways beyond DNA might you encode information in molecules? What computational primitives might you identify to actually do some computation once this information has been stored? And then what are the applications that really might make sense? For DNA, it might make sense to be able to search large data spaces for particular features. Maybe a strategy based on reaction rates might lend itself to doing optimization types of problems. So very, very fundamental, very early program. Where there really is a lot that's unknown about the potential here. But if we don't explore, we won't get to the answers. So there's actually some really interesting results coming out of this program. They just had their first PI meeting, and it's really exceeded expectations in terms of how far they've come so far. A new program that's currently, the BA closed recently. As we increasingly see more and more access to space across many, new countries are getting access to space, and there are more frequent launches. We recognize that we need to make sure that we understand that our space assets are going to function as we expect them to when we need them to function. So as an interesting observation, the SpaceX launch, I guess it was about a year or so ago, the Falcon Heavy rocket. There's a paper that was published not too long after that observed that event actually punched a pretty several hundred kilometer, I think, hole in the ionosphere. And we don't know what that would have done to our assets had we needed to use them. So we want to make sure that that we're able to predict the space weather environment at a temporal and spatial resolution that that's sufficient to give military commander confidence as to what that environment will look like if we have to rely on space assets. So it's a modeling program that's looking to couple across the magneto, the thermal, all the aspects of the atmosphere and the ionosphere. We currently don't have a capability to model across all of those, and we currently don't have a capability to get to the either spatial or the temporal resolution that we need to do that. So that's what this program is really focused on. So I want to start to wrap up a little bit and just give you a introduction to several other program opportunities that tend to be on a annual cycle. We have a program called YFA, and annually PMs from across the agency, so all of the offices are involved, will compete for topics that they're interested in, and the agency will select from those topics and publish a BAA with an order of maybe 20 to 25 of those topics. And it's very competitive, but researchers that are sort of in their young to mid part of their career, either pre-tenure or within 3 years of tenure, at academic and nonprofit institutions can compete for this. And the awards are up to $250K per year for 2 years. And then there's opportunity for a third year of funding up to $500K. So it can be up to $1 million for 3 years. And this is a great opportunity for these researchers to get exposed to the DoD challenge problems, to get introduced to the broader DoD R&D community. The PMs who sponsor these tend to bring the Young Faculty Award performers to their larger program reviews. And from a DARPA perspective, we really feel like we're recruiting our future principal investigators for our larger programs, and even in some cases our future program managers. So it's a great program, and you just have to watch grants.gov or FedBizOps for the announcement of topics every year.
Does the management rotate?
Not anymore.
Is it always in DSO now?
It used to rotate, but starting 2 years ago or so, it got permanently. But again, it's the topics come from every single office has in the last 2 years. It's DSO-BAA, yes. Mm-hmm.
Or ARPA.
Yeah.
So you mentioned nonprofit scientists and nonprofits are eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they are supposed to be equivalent to a tenure track faculty member. So I mean, we actually have a lot of research staff and nonprofit staff as well. How do they show justification for their...
That is a good question, and I'm not sure. I don't have the answer, okay, but I will get that for you. Yeah. So DSO, I guess a little over a year ago, recognized that there was a need to be able to engage the community faster and in a way that allowed us to get into an area that's not quite ready for a large program, but was bigger than what we would typically do at a small sort of scoping or seedling effort. And so we pioneered within the agency something called disruptioneering. And the idea is to get an idea out in front of the community. The awards are up to $1 million each, and they're released through special notices that occur several times throughout the year. We really feel, if you haven't read the National Defense Strategy, I would encourage you. It's actually very well written. It's Secretary Mattis's priorities for for national defense. And he speaks to the need to harness and protect the national security innovation base and to deliver performance at the speed of relevance. And we really feel like our success in rolling out this disruptioneering program is a way to really accelerate. Remember, I talked, one of the first trends and opportunities was how can we engage the community in a different way to really accelerate R&D and development of new science and technology that can ultimately lead to new capabilities. So it's for scoping out in a bigger way, up to $1 million, 18 months, what might be a larger program. And our goal is the time from the time you see the notice published to being on contract, 90 days or less. And we've been, our first two, we had some lessons learned, but after that, we've actually been meeting that goal. We've been very successful in doing that. It's restricted to other transactions, so there are payable milestones. It's a much truncated proposal. It's 8 to 10 pages, if that, and then there's a template for your cost. But it's been very successful, and it's been a model that's really attracted the interest of the rest of the agency and elsewhere in the DoD. I want to real quickly just run through the DARPA AI strategy, because at the DARPA 60th conference a couple months ago, our director announced our $2 billion AI Next campaign. So a commitment of up to $400 million per year for 5 years. In reality, that's not new money. We actually have across the agency today on the order of 80 programs that are either advancing state-of-the-art in AI or leveraging AI in some way. But the investment will increase above that to get to that $400 million roughly per year. DARPA has been in AI since the very beginning of the field, and almost since the beginning of DARPA's inception. And we view the development of AI as occurring in waves, with the first wave being developing machines where we program in the rules. And TurboTax is a great example of first wave AI. You might not think of it as being artificial intelligence, but we've programmed in the rules and it knows how to respond to different queries. The second wave begins late 80s, early 90s of being able to do statistical learning or machine learning. Initially, we didn't have the hardware to really have that advance very, very far, but with the development of faster and faster processors and parallel processors in this last decade or two, we've really seen the power of this technique for doing pattern recognition and things like computer vision. And but we also recognize that there's still a lot of brittleness and limitations to that technology, particularly in the context of military applications where we can't afford for it to be wrong. It really does have to be very robust. And so we're interested in understanding the limitations of that technology, where it can be applied reliably to DoD applications. But we're also in this new AI campaign really looking to move beyond current state-of-the-art machine learning. And I'm doing that in quotes because I actually I believe machine learning is a misnomer. I think we have machine-trained systems. When we have a system that actually can tell you that it doesn't know whether it has a good answer or not. Learning implies that you have some memory of or some recognition of what you know and what you don't know, and I don't think we're there yet. But this next wave of AI, what we're calling contextual reasoning, the ability to understand how that you are facing a new situation, and ability to do something if you don't know the answer, will be what we consider that third wave. And we're looking to both develop. I'll go to the next slide. While you're looking at this, I'll explain a little bit more what we mean. So again, this is sort of a history of the waves and DARPA innovations. And so some of our early work ultimately found its way into Siri. Our early work in autonomy ended up, early work in the 80s on autonomous vehicles, and then our grand challenges in the early 2000s were really laid the groundwork for some of the driverless technology that we're seeing today. But to sort of give you a flavor for what we mean by third wave, the example I like to use is we can train a system If you want to ask the question, show me pictures of doors. We can train the system very easily to identify doors. Show me pictures of people standing in front of doors. We have to retrain, but we can find a person and put them in front of doors. If you want to ask the question, tell me, based on this picture of a person in front of a door, what's the weather outside? Well, then that becomes, again, and you have to start from the training of everything, which doors are actually representing going from inside to outside. You have to associate an umbrella with rain. You have to associate a coat with cold. Every time you want to ask a different question, right today, basically we have to start from scratch and we have to retrain. And if you want to be able to really cover a large space of scenarios and questions that you can answer, then you have to have the data for everything. And the more complex we're driving towards trying to train on the data of the universe, and that's simply not scalable to do that. So we want to be able to think about ways that we can get beyond those limitations, and we think it's going to be a combination of being able to bake in or program in some of the first wave approaches where we actually explain the rules, and there's going to be some statistical learning, training as well, but there's something else that we need to be able to add to have machines that ultimately begin to learn the way humans do. And so our strategy, again, with this third wave, what we think we can really do is move machines from being tools to more partners. And so the things that we have to develop are common sense reasoning. We have to be able to understand the foundations and the current limitations of machine learning as it stands today. And we want to actually be able to take what we have today, the sort of second wave technologies, and look at how we can actually apply them to problems that exist today. And so our strategy involves looking at all three of these aspects. And the way we're going to actually execute that is there'll be multiple major, sort of the traditional DARPA program BAAs coming out in these areas. We're also funding built on the success of the Disruptioneering, a series of fast-paced, high-risk, but accelerated efforts that we're calling the AI exploration. And we're going to be posing some actual challenge problems in terms of being able to apply the second wave as it exists today to areas that really would be transformational if we could apply them in a robust way. So again, this artificial intelligence exploration, this is that accelerated rapid acquisition program. The umbrella announcement was posted in July. We've had 2, I think, special notices under this solicitation. We weren't sure when this umbrella one was going to come out, so we actually had a AIE topic come out under our Disruptioneering. That was the physics of AI, and that program just kicked off. But you're going to see these come out over time at a pretty regular cadence. And again, up to $1 million, 18 months, very abbreviated proposal and review process. So please keep an eye out for those if you have ideas that are responsive to the topics that you're going to see coming out through this. So I'm going to wrap up here by just giving you some tips in terms of how to. Yeah, go ahead.
A question about that AI.
Mm-hmm.
I was guilty of this. There's a little button there with the red. Yeah.
How's that? Can you all hear me now?
I didn't do it myself.
Are we limited to just the third wave, or can we start to investigate the fourth and the fifth?
That'll be topic driven. Generally, you're going to see those topics as they come out to be more towards moving towards a third wave, but I don't think it'll be exclusive. You'll just have to wait and see as the topics come out. And if you want to come talk to a PM, I would encourage you to do that, because maybe you can convince them to post a topic. But there will be opportunities focused on the understanding the limitations and application of second wave to a number of DoD problems in our larger BAAs as well. So.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So in preparing to come talk to a DARPA PM, it's important that you understand the questions that we actually have to address in order to convince our management to invest money in areas that we care about. And in particular, you really need to be able to articulate very clearly and without a lot of jargon, what you're trying to do, why it's important and how it overcomes the limitations of today, why what you're proposing is new and there's a reason why you think you can succeed today, why is now the right time, and what will be the impact, okay? As you get to, ideally you get a program manager excited about this and then they're going to start asking questions like, okay, well, what are the real risks here and how are you going to address and mitigate those risks? How much will it cost? How long is it going to take? How are we going to measure progress? But really these 1, 2, 3, 4, is that right? 1, 2, 3, yeah. These first 4 are really what are going to get you in the door to have a an engaging conversation with a PM. You have a question again? Yeah.
Yeah, this came out in what 75, 77 when he was in
Oh
charge of
yeah,
DARPA.
he's the one that George Heilmeyer when he was the director.
Antiquated?
Sorry?
Doesn't that still seem a bit antiquated to kind of rely on that?
No.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Those are pretty compelling questions as to why you would want to.
But there's no updated models?
Sorry, what?
There's no updated models to follow for grabbing y'all's attention?
No, these are, so Mark actually put together a Heilmeyerology presentation internal to DARPA, and he looked at sort of the original Heilmeyer and the ones that different directors in since then. And they're, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 7, sometimes there's 8, but they're all variations on this theme. And if you can answer these in a clear, concise way, you're in pretty good shape to talk to a PM. So, and by the way, they're adopted by other ARPA-like agencies. IARPA uses these. They've added their own additional questions, but they're fundamentally here. And we actually hear that some of the other commercial or nonprofit funding entities will apply these as well. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't mean to be the third bald fellow to ask
Yeah.
a question, but I was just curious, does DARPA only fund projects on a project-by-project basis, or do you consider the InQtel model at CIA where you invest in a firm and track the firm's progress?
So we fund, we're a projects agency. We fund programs that are typically populated by multiple performers, which are often multidisciplinary teams, right? I'm not sure what I'm familiar with the InQtel, but I'm not sure I quite understand your question. We are not looking for a return on investment that is going to supplement our ability to invest further.
As I understand,
Yeah.
that's not the sole reason they do that. Normally, like,
No, they have a customer that they are supporting, correct.
But it seems like a hybrid of the two may work. Where we only have 2 high-tech research agencies between the two. Perhaps it may be worthwhile considering investing in firms like, for example, they funded Palantir,
Mm-hmm.
which would create a software that we use in the Army. So, is that something DARPA would consider? I'm hearing you say no. It's just that's not.
I'm still not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I think he's asking if you engage in a venture capital.
Right, and venture capital beyond projects. So say a single firm has won 5 bids
Mhm.
in response to DARPA in niche areas. Would DARPA still engage them on a bid-by-bid basis, or would they say, hey, we're going to buckle up and probably 10% of this firm?
Oh no, we invest on a bid by bid basis.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think there have been times in the past where we've formed consortiums, but that's really been the exception rather than the rule. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you push on the little red button, there's, that silver button in the chair.
Oh, okay. So DARPA has had
Transition into Q&A.
a considerable interest in transition as of late. Well, not just as of late. It has for a long time, but especially there right now is a lot of interest in transition, and transition is supported a variety of different ways. It's really a whole panoply of ways. The specific InQtel mode is not one that we embrace, but we embrace others that really accomplish much the same thing. And there are many examples of companies. New starts that have been essentially funded indirectly, not in a business case specific way, venture capitalist way exactly, but that exists primarily because of DARPA contracts.
So this is, again, we think big. We want to think revolutionary versus evolutionary. This, I think, is a very true. I looked it up on Snopes. It's actually true. But comparison of what we consider to be a revolutionary versus evolutionary thinking. So, any questions at this point? We're kind of already transitioned into that mode already.
So just a couple of housekeeping things. We will have a reception right after we wrap up here with Dr. Browning, so the conversation could absolutely continue in maybe a more direct way when we go outside to the hospitality area. So if you don't get a question answered in here, we continue the conversation hopefully for a little while at least. And then secondly, please use the little microphone button, and we'll take maybe hopefully 3-4 questions at least, and then we'll transition to the reception. So, go for it.
Questions? All right.
I guess I will ask a transition question following up on Mark, which is maybe more DSO specific. So you all are sort of, the most basic research part of DARPA, or most fundamentals at DARPA. So how does transition work in DSO, let's say, versus another office?
So that is true, but I'll also argue under that anticipating surprise, we actually do surprisingly have a number of programs that we can point to that have actually transitioned to actual capability in deployed systems. But you're right. In general, the balance of our portfolio is more on that fundamental. So transition means a lot. It has a broader definition for us than it does for the systems offices, for sure. Transition for us could be we got to a certain level of believability in the capability that we're now ready going to look at taking the technology that next step. Maybe DARPA does that. Maybe another DoD funding agency does it. Maybe somebody in an intelligence agency does it. It could transition to another office. So we have the luxury of transition meaning a lot of different things. Oftentimes it is another program is stood up either within DARPA or somewhere else to take the technology that next step. Sometimes even within DSO. The Palm Power program is a good example of that was one that was looking to develop portable power sources for the warfighter, and it started with very fundamental new materials, new chemistry, new fuel, new battery. I mean, this range of technologies we looked at. And in the end, the successful one happened to be a particular fuel cell technology, and so sold a follow-on program called Robust Portable Power Systems, where we began to ruggedize that. And then after that, there was another program to actually deploy it in the context of a UAV and micro-robot. And ultimately, that technology flew in Afghanistan. So we took it stepwise to an actual capability.
Right.
Okay, so this is kind of a philosophical question, I guess. I mean, you've got this effort in DARPA focused on defense applications, yet a lot of spin-off in the commercial world potentially. You have DHS S&T, which does some degree of that, focused on the homeland world. But I was struck a bit about an assessment someone recently did, I read, on the AI status between us and China. Mm-hmm. That we're kind of trying to hit the ball out of the park in every effort, and they're basically trying to make money. And that was, if I could boil it all down to that. So I'm just wondering, in your perspective, how does it really work in the U.S.? And is that a valid assessment? And how does it work in the U.S.? Who is doing it for the rest of, we've got DHS, we have defense, but who really should lead for the rest? Given you spin off a lot of things, but who's really in the lead, organizing a lead for the rest of the U.S.'s competition in the world, which I think in the end will come down to an economic one, not a defense one?
So when you say who should lead, do you mean nation-wise, or do you mean within the U.S.? Or?
Yeah, within the U.S. I'm just thinking about the U.S. as a competitor.
I would say, I saw some of the same press, but I would say that we are more organized than maybe is apparent. Certainly within the DoD, we have a very well-articulated strategy for AI. The Joint AI Center has been stood up to take fairly mature AI technologies and actually apply them and sustain them for DoD applications. DARPA is on the more fundamental development effort, and we're feeding Jake, and we're getting feedback in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what we need to improve in. So that informs our investment strategy going forward. And then there's the Defense Innovation Unit and the Strategic Capability Offices. DIU is looking to leverage and repurpose technology being developed in the commercial sector, again, to feed into the JAKE. And then the SCO, the Strategic Capability Office, is looking to repurpose within DoD technology that might have been developed for one purpose. There is the President's Select Committee on Artificial Intelligence, which has representatives, leadership from NSF, DOE, intelligence. Our director is co-chairing that with, I think, with NSF leadership. So there is coordination. From a DARPA perspective, our director will be the first to tell you that we look across the space, and we will invest in areas where we are certain we can take a leadership role. And so that's where our AI strategy, from that perspective, that's how we put that together. I concur that China's vision, both here and I think in quantum too, it probably applies too, is towards a commercialization and where can we make money. But I think that's true for U.S. companies as well. So.
Maybe one more. All good. Okay. All right. Well, let's thank our speaker one more time. I do have a small parting gift of nominal value,
okay.
Less than $25, I'm sure. Less than $25, right, Tracy? Okay. So will not violate any ethics regulations. So, Valerie, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, please, if you can, join us. There's some food and wine and other refreshments out back in the hospitality area, and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.